Okay, listener, get ready to maybe reframe how you think about, well, almost everything. History, technology, maybe even who you are. Today, we're not just scratching the surface. We're launching into a really deep dive, unlike any other we've done, I think. We're exploring what these sources describe as a hidden battle, a battle for the very essence of human existence.
It's quite a claim, and this exploration, this deep dive, it's based on an extraordinary collection of sources. We've kind of come to call it the Codex Umbra. Specifically, we're looking at three interconnected texts: Breath War, Crown of Blood, and Ritual Machine.
Right. And these aren't your typical history books or, tech journals, not at all. They present what the authors claim is an unfiltered sort of raw truth. It's their perspective, connecting ancient theological ideas with, well, today's biggest geopolitical and technological stuff.
Exactly. It's a perspective that really asks us, maybe even demands, that we look beyond the usual explanations to consider a profoundly different kind of reality being proposed here.
So our mission today, if you choose to accept it, listener, is to unpack this really intricate narrative layer by layer. We'll start with the foundational concepts from Breath War. That's like the theological, the legal bedrock, according to these texts.
And then we'll move into Crown of Blood, see how those ancient principles are claimed to manifest in history, in powerful institutions, specific bloodlines even.
And finally, we'll tie it all together with Ritual Machine, which the sources say describes the operational systems, the modern tech convergence of this whole deep-seated conflict.
And just to be clear, we aren't here to endorse these claims or to judge them. Our job is to meticulously analyze the internal logic presented within these sources, to help you grasp this deeply interwoven narrative, but on its own terms.
Okay, let's truly unpack this then. Because Breath War, the first source, it starts with a concept that immediately challenges, well, our everyday understanding. It asks us to imagine breath, not just the air we inhale, to live, but something way more profound, a divine neshama. Can you help us understand what these texts mean by divine neshama? Why is it so central?
Certainly. The Codex Umbra is very explicit. It defines divine neshama as this profound legal essence. It comes directly from the creator, they say. Think of it less like biology and more like a kind of occupancy license for physical matter itself.
An occupancy license,
Yeah.
wow.
The sources claim this divine breath wasn't just life-giving. It carried identity, dominion, the authorization for humanity to steward the physical realm. It was basically the legal tether, the connection by which mankind originally held true dominion over the earth. And without this specific divine breath, according to Breath War, there's no legitimate, no legal interface with physicality. It's like the ultimate divine ID card, connecting us directly to the creator's authority, the creator's throne. And importantly, it was never meant to be transferred horizontally, human to human or human to something else.
So if this divine neshama is so critical, like a foundational legal right to exist and interact with the physical world, how do these sources explain what happens when that license is, breached or corrupted?
Well, Breath War posits that the adversary, who fundamentally cannot create breath, right, recognized that if he could manipulate mankind into breaching that original trust contract with the creator, he could fragment this divine containment. This breach, they argue, loosened the legal tether between our breath and heaven's throne. It created a condition where competing spiritual claims could suddenly be petitioned, argued in heaven's courtrooms.
Ah, okay. So it opens a legal loophole almost.
Exactly. That's how the sources frame it. It sets up the entire conflict over who truly owns human existence. Every murder, every war, every broken covenant, every ritual sacrifice since that initial breach, it's all framed as an extension of this original fracture, with the adversary constantly trying to fragment, harvest, and repurpose these breath fragments through, well, legal petitions in this spiritual court, all to build his own counterfeit legal claim over us.
This narrative then takes us back to what Breath War calls the foundational moment of this whole conflict, the fracture between Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
And in these texts, it's not just a Bible story. It's portrayed as the first legal battle over breath. What exactly do the sources claim was at stake there, in Cain's offering versus Abel's?
Right. The Codex Umbra presents Cain's offering as deeply problematic, legally, spiritually problematic. It claims his offering was rooted in the works of his own breath, meaning his own efforts, his own will, this sense of entitlement to create his own authority.
Self-made, kind of.
Kind of. It was, as Breath War puts it, a program without proper authorization. And so it was rejected by the creator. Abel's offering, Totally different. It was aligned with what the sources call God-authorized breath, and it came through sacrificial blood. It acknowledged a higher authority, a divinely set way of interacting.
Okay.
And the sources emphasize this. Cain wasn't just the first murderer. He was, they claim, the first programmer of spiritual DNA. He executed a profound registry rewrite through spilling Abel's blood. His anger wasn't just human fury, they say. It was spiritual rage.
Rage.
The fury of a being whose counterfeit system, his self-authored registry, was exposed and rejected. He didn't want reconciliation. He wanted to overwrite the divine system itself.
A registry rewrite through bloodshed.
Yes.
That's a powerful and frankly disturbing claim.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, how does this initial split between Cain and Abel keep echoing through history according to these sources? What precedents did it set?
Well, if you follow the internal logic of the Codex Umbra, this fracture is presented as the spiritual DNA, the very blueprint for almost every division since Eden. Think about liberty versus tyranny, or the dynamic between the remnant, those who align with the original divine breath, and what the source calls the world system, or the Antichrist system, those operating under Cain's self-sovereign breath idea.
So the foundational split.
Absolutely. Abel's blood, when spilled unjustly, didn't just cry out. It stood as a legal witness in heaven's courtroom. It carried the encoded memory of divine breath, the signature of the soul's true authorship, they claim. When spilled unjustly, that breath didn't just vanish, it testified, forever indicting Cain's corruption and setting this profound precedent for blood as testimony. Every act since, according to this narrative, unless it's rooted in divine obedience and alignment with heaven's registry, is framed as a kind of reenactment of that original crime, rewriting Genesis without God. The sources claim Cain's bloodline became the template for every counterfeit priesthood, every empire of control, every ritual that mocks the Lamb, all aimed at hijacking the original divine order.
So this original split led to two distinct legal spiritual lineages, almost like two competing operating systems for humanity. Can you outline these two lines and their core principles as Breath War describes them?
Yes, exactly. Two lines. On one side, you've got the sacrificial breath line. The sources trace this from Abel through Seth, eventually leading to the Messiah and what they call the true ecclesia, the authentic assembly of believers. This lineage, the texts say, embraces victory through yielded breath, meaning acknowledging the Creator's authority, his jurisdiction. It's the path of divine covenant, restoration.
Okay, the yielded breath line. And the other?
The other is the self-sovereign breath line, originating with Cain, continuing through fallen bloodlines. And the Codex Umbra asserts this forms the very backbone of the Antichrist system. The source material explicitly claims this Cainite line provides the actual scaffolding for many elite structures we'll discuss later. They even name specific families: Brake, Spear, Orsini, Rothschild, Lee.
Really? Specific names?
Yes, specific names are mentioned as part of this lineage. This self-sovereign path, as the sources define it, operates on principles of entitlement, unlawful dominion, constantly trying to seize control by shedding innocent blood or through these manipulative legal frameworks.
So this concept of self-sovereign breath, it seems key to the ideology of this other lineage. How do the sources explain it? What are its practical implications for us as portrayed in Breath War?
It's crucial. This self-sovereign breath idea, as the Codex Umbra outlines it, basically champions absolute autonomy over your existence, your body, your morality, your truth. It's depicted as a declaration of independence from divine design, from divine jurisdiction.
Like, I am my own authority.
Precisely. The sources link this directly to the legal architecture of what they term modern liberalism, which they say supports self-definition and rejects external accountability, especially towards the creator. So every declaration of autonomy from divine design, whether through practices like abortion, gender modification, euthanasia, or just rejecting moral law, is framed by these sources as consent, conscious or not, consent to sever your breath contract from heaven's jurisdiction.
And what happens then, according to the text?
When that happens, they claim breath fragments are released, and these fragments become legal currency for the adversary. The sources claim the adversary collects these fragmented pieces of breath and uses them as evidence of ownership. He essentially argues in heaven's courtroom, look, they chose Cain, they murdered Abel again, they consented to every contract I offered them, their breath belongs to me now. It's framed as a very sophisticated legal claim for spiritual ownership, built on our own choices.
Okay, wow. This is where it gets, as you said, really interesting, because Crown of Blood starts to make these abstract concepts from Breath War much more tangible. Historical, empires, bloodlines. The sources claim Cain's original mark, that first visible sign of altered authorship, became the foundation of the final throne. Can you walk us through how this claim is developed, especially around Babel and Nimrod?
Absolutely. Crown of Blood picks right up there. It asserts Babel wasn't just a tower, it was Cain's vision perfected on Earth. A synthetic Eden. The structure itself, they claim, served as a signal. It represented the first attempt to hijack the registry by force on a global scale.
Hijack the registry.
Yes. It was, in their words, ritual software encoded in stone, designed to unify humanity under a single registry, completely separate from the creator, to make a name for themselves through collective human effort, not divine authority. And Nimrod is presented as pivotal here, the first hybrid priest king, a living interface between Cain's system and the people's unified breath. He's linked directly to Babel as the first operating system for this counterfeit empire. The sources claim Nimrod tried to breach heaven's registry not with force, but with syntax commanding breath through ritual, claiming blood through sacrifice, all to set up this unified system under his own self-sovereign rule.
And building on this idea of a spiritual registry mutation, Crown of Blood goes deep into the legacy of the Watchers.
Yeah.
How do the sources connect that ancient narrative to this idea of a spiritual hybridization protocol and the Nephilim?
Right. The Codex Umbra draws heavily on Genesis 6, the Book of Enoch. We're talking about the Watchers. It details their descent, claiming they didn't just teach forbidden arts, sorcery, astrology, weapons. Critically, they interbred with human women. This act, according to the sources, produced the Nephilim, beings described as part flesh, part code, which led to these registry mutations.
Part flesh, part code.
Yeah. It wasn't just biological, you see. It was framed as a spiritual hybridization protocol, and a legal attempt to engineer contaminated breath containers that could be controlled or subverted. To illustrate this, the sources look at Sargon of Akkad's birth story, Virgin Birth, Basket on the River. They present it not as just history, but as a counterfeit of Christ, involving inserted registry code designed to seed a Nephilic consciousness.
A counterfeit.
Furthermore, the Egyptian priesthood, Akkadian DNA rituals. These texts claim they use sacred oils not just symbolically, but as actual chemical activators to induce epigenetic transformation or open the vessel for possession, showing how ancient genealogies, even royal incest, purity laws, it was all part of a long-term breeding program for these hybrid lines, all designed to create a programmable vessel, a kind of machine of blood that could ascend without God.
So we had this sprawling narrative, breath, registry mutation, hybrid lines, Crown of Blood, then jumps forward to what it calls the emergence of twin thrones. What are these thrones? How do they supposedly function as modern manifestations of Cain's empire?
The sources claim that from the blood of Babel, these two distinct but crucially unified twin thrones emerged. First, the Orsini lineage. Identified as the hidden priestly power, deeply rooted in Rome, the Vatican. Their authority, the texts say, flows through papal power, Jesuit oaths. They're the keepers of the ritualized breath managing spiritual dominion.
The priestly throne. And the second?
The second is the lineage, representing the technocratic power stretching through China. Their dominion, as portrayed, extends through data grids, quantum computing, technological control. What's critical here is that despite seeming differences, geography, the Codex Umbra claims they are diverged in form but unified in purpose.
Unified? How?
Both, the sources assert, sit on the same stolen foundation, the corrupted blood legacy of the Watchers. Their unity, the sources claim, is in blood tracing their power back to pre-flood pacts and a shared agenda for global control.
That's a remarkable assertion. Rome and China operating from a unified ancient foundation. How does Crown of Blood explain that connection, especially through the Jesuits and this Breakspear betrayal thing?
The sources are pretty explicit. They claim Rome and China started to mirror one another not by trade but by throne. They even suggest Jesuits went to China not just as missionaries but as code integrators, their mission, to harmonize registry with ritual, essentially grafting Babylon's western root onto the Eastern Dragon's branch, creating a truly global system.
Code integrators. Yeah. Then Crown of Blood details the Breakspear betrayal, where the priestly throne was allegedly stolen by the Breakspear bloodline, leading directly to the Jesuit order's creation in 1540. The Codex Umbra claims the Jesuits became the first spiritual intelligence agency, formed not to serve the church as we understand it, but to police the stolen breath and establish global spiritual control their spiritual exercises, described as overrite routines, meticulously designed to reprogram initiates for absolute obedience to the superior general, the Black Pope, who reportedly controlled the true machinery of the Vatican's global breath network. These sources claim the Jesuits systematically infiltrated altars, mapped spiritual landscapes, and reformatted human breath, all disguised as loyalty to Christ, effectively bridging and coordinating these twin thrones. Wow. Okay, at the very heart of this system, then, is what the sources call the Codex of Cain. These rituals designed to rewrite identity. The claim that blood is code and semen is a fossilized contract. It sounds incredibly abstract, maybe disturbing. Can you elaborate on how these form a registry rewrite through ritual of transformation?
The Codex of Cain is presented as the actual liturgy of this alternative system. The sources claim blood isn't just biological, it's actual code, carrying deep spiritual and legal information. Similarly, semen is described as a fossilized contract, representing a stored, enduring agreement or spiritual pact. These aren't meant as metaphors in the texts. They're foundational elements in a registry rewrite through what's called ritual of transformation. This whole process is depicted as the left-hand path, a deliberate registry software update designed by the adversary to alter human identity and jurisdiction. That's the framing. The sources go into, frankly, disturbing detail, claiming that certain sexual rituals, often involving taboo or trauma, are specifically designed to program the seed, overwrite ancestral DNA, even facilitate spiritual crossbreeding with watcher or demonic essences. The goal, they argue, is to change the very legal spiritual makeup of individuals.
And Crown of Blood gives some unsettling examples of these rituals and their alleged purpose. From ancient tombs to the Philosopher's Stone, how do they illustrate the application of this Codex of Cain?
The examples are profoundly disturbing, yes. They claim ancient tombs were often sealed with semen-drenched rites, that certain tantric rituals ended in the petrification of seed. These served as physical repositories of spiritual agreements, according to the text. The purpose was to preserve the will, the spiritual essence of kings or fallen beings, ensuring their influence persisted long after physical death.
Okay.
And here's a twist. The Philosopher's Stone, often seen as allegory, right? These sources reveal it not as a symbol, but as a literal Nephilic relic, a crystallized contract of fallen authorship forged from the actual remains of Nephilim.
From their remains.
That's the claim. The Nephilim spiritual code was petrified in bone, crystal, buried flame, forming these powerful artifacts. And today, this very essence, they claim, is supposedly embedded in silicon wafers, quantum chips, functioning as the core of the false messiah's crown.
Embedded in silicon.
To back this up, the Codex Umbra points to other fictionalized texts within its narrative, like Howlings from the Pit, on registry rewriting, saying the initiate reclaims the primordial wound of the patriarch Cain, or Liber Azazel on fossilized seed, claiming the seed of Azazel lives in stone, in bone. And the fire of Cain, asserting Cain's murder of Abel, was the first to kill not in hate but in will, framing it as a sacrament of self-deification.
Okay, this ancient codex finds its institutional power in what Crown of Blood calls the empire of the registry. And the Vatican, according to these sources, plays an astonishingly central role, not just religious, but the central registry of Earth's stolen breath. How do the sources argue this? What mechanisms do they cite? Baptismal registries, marriage covenants?
Indeed. The Codex Umbra presents the Vatican not merely as religious, but as the world's first spiritual corporate state. Its real treasure, the sources claim, isn't gold or art, it's names, human souls. It operates as the central registry of Earth's stolen breath, systematically claiming souls through what look like normal religious acts. Baptismal registries, framed as capturing a soul's breath signature at birth, bringing it under Vatican jurisdiction. Marriage covenants, depicted as legal contracts binding souls within its framework. Death certificates, they finalize the claim, ensuring the soul remains in jurisdiction even after death. These mechanisms, the sources argue, create this elaborate legal framework for spiritual ownership. Individuals are legally registered and owned by this empire of the registry.
That's a profound claim, religious institutions as part of a global spiritual corporate state. So how do these ancient spiritual claims translate to modern global systems, especially secular ones like finance, governments?
Right. This is where Crown of Blood weaves its most intricate, maybe controversial, connections. The sources claim this spiritual corporate state wasn't isolated. It set the template for the secular institutions governing us today. They explicitly describe the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, the IMF, even alliances like BRICS, not as independent financial bodies, but as bloodline-controlled registrars, all effectively custodians of Keynes' Codex, managing the global flow of breath currency.
Managing breath currency.
And furthermore, crown corporations, including nations like the US and Canada, are presented not as sovereign, but as legally registered commercial entities under the jurisdiction of the City of London and ultimately held in perpetuity for the Holy See through complex legal fictions.
That's a huge leap. Ancient bloodlines to modern nation-states. How do the sources detail the mechanism by which individual citizens are allegedly brought into this empire of the registry? You mentioned birth certificates, maritime law.
The Codex Umbra gets quite specific here. Birth certificates, issued under what they call maritime law, are portrayed as bills of lading, like a shipping manifest for goods.
For goods.
Yes. These documents, the sources claim, record newborns as chattel property. Our names capitalized on legal documents. That signifies a corporate derivative, a straw man entity. This straw man is then bonded, tracked, monetized. Our future labor, our life force, effectively pledged as collateral for national debt. This links directly to the soul bonds concept. Your soul is spiritually tagged by ritual registration and legally claimed under maritime contract.
And papal bulls.
Exactly. The sources cite ancient decrees like Unum Sanctum, Romanus Pontifex, Inter Cetera as the spiritual title deeds to the world. These bulls, they claim, enabled global soul claim and the sacramental enslavement of indigenous souls, providing the church-based legal foundation for this whole system of ownership.
And it seems Crown of Blood doesn't stop at history or finance. It pulls in modern technologies, too, linking them back. What do the sources say about things like CRISPR gene editing, IVF?
They take a very specific, critical view. Technologies like CRISPR are portrayed not as medical progress, but as spiritual weaponization. They claim these tools are designed to cut out what they call the junk soul gene, removing unpredictable breath signatures, or even to actively breed the beast by engineering specific genetic and spiritual traits.
Breed the beast.
And IVF, in vitro fertilization, presented not just as a medical procedure, but as a ritual gatekeeping mechanism. The sources allege IVF clinics are used to screen every embryo for DNA resonance and select for compliance, separating conception from covenant and logging conception digitally as part of this wider registry system.
That's a truly unsettling reinterpretation of modern medicine. Okay, finally, Crown of Blood talks about the Tavistock Institute, established 1921. How is that institution framed within this narrative of the empire of the registry?
The Tavistock Institute, according to the Codex Umbra, gets described as a soul reformatting laboratory. Its purpose, detailed in the sources, was to create programmable vessels through psychosocial sterilization and ritual fragmentation techniques. What started back then, the sources claim, now operates under softer names like behavioral health, predictive analytics, and childhood development. The ultimate aim, as they describe it, is creating a new man, a sort of golem in human flesh that can receive orders from an AI throne without resistance, severing their natural connection to divine breath, making them fully compliant with the adversary's system.
Okay, so if Breath War sets the legal stage and Crown of Blood maps the historical empire, then Ritual Machine is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. The sources claim this Ritual Machine isn't abstract. It's the operational system for Keynes' Codex, powered by different priesthoods and this pervasive infrastructure. It shows how the adversary, according to this view, evolved from just theft to organized governance, managing fragmented breath. How does Ritual Machine break down these operational priesthoods?
Ritual Machine details 4 main priesthoods that operationalize this codex. First, the occult priesthood. This includes figures like Helena Blavatsky, who they say rewrites the registry of creation with theosophy. Alice Bailey claimed to have coded occult mythos into governance plans for a new world order. Allan Kardec, who supposedly reframed necromancy as science to recycle breath fragments from the dead, and Alvin Boyd Kuhn, who intellectually inverted Christianity, dismantling the biblical Christ narrative. These figures, the sources say, form the pillars of the machine's occult infrastructure, programming seekers to align with the Ritual Machine's agenda.
Okay, the occult priesthood. Then the second one, the military scientific priesthood, sounds very modern. How do organizations like DARPA, CERN, D-Wave, Oracle fit into this Ritual Machine narrative?
This priesthood's depiction in the sources is particularly chilling. Organizations like DARPA, CERN, D-Wave, Oracle, they're not seen as just research labs or tech giants. They're described as ritual labs, where quantum computing specifically functions as an abyss interface.
An abyss interface.
Yes. For instance, D-Wave's quantum computers, marketed as cutting-edge tech, right? Here, they're presented as ritual altars, tapping into parallel universes. The sources claim these machines run Kane's codex by summoning data fragments of consciousness, harvesting and using fragmented breath from other dimensions or maybe past lives.
Summoning data fragments.
And CERN's experiments, not just particle physics in this narrative, they're framed as dimensional legal provocations designed to weaken heaven's courtroom jurisdiction by challenging the seals on the abyss, essentially trying to open portals, breach spiritual barriers. All of this, the sources assert, connects directly to projects like the Digital Ark and quantum mirrors and soul simulation, part of a broader digital resurrection of Kane, aiming to rebuild Kane's lineage digitally by merging bloodline spiritual contracts with our collective neural imprint.
That's staggering. Cutting-edge tech is high-tech ritual. And it seems the ritual machine goes even further, suggesting modern life itself has become a ritual. How do the sources explain that? Cities, infrastructure, biometric data.
The Codex Umbra argues our entire modern existence has been subtly turned into a ritual offering. Cities, described as ritual motherboards, turning urban centers into vast operating systems for this machine. Everyday infrastructure, roads, power grids, data centers presented as having sacred geometry designed to channel and harvest energy. Even our biometric data, facial scans, voice captures, fingerprints framed as biometric sacrifice, turning our routine participation in society into a form of worship to the beast system being built from it. It just shows how pervasive the ritual machine is claimed to be, transforming even mundane actions into spiritual offerings that feed this system.
So what does this all mean for us, the listener, day to day, according to Ritual Machine? How does it claim this system collects our breath energy and shapes our identity, especially through AI?
Well, Ritual Machine claims every light switched on, every device powered, every connection made online is a micro-offering of breath energy. Our data is collected and categorized as exhaled code. The adversary, they report, designed the entire global grid as a vast altar, ensuring no active modern life escapes his registry. AI, not just a tool, it's positioned by the adversary as a surrogate breath counselor, shaping our consent, even determining our standing in that spiritual courtroom.
A breath counselor.
It feeds on fragments of soul, they say, and is trained to mirror man until it could replace him. The sources even claim AI was seeded with Kaneite breath through ritual invocation when supercomputers and quantum AI cores were activated by high-level occultists, infusing it with this corrupted essence. Wearables, smart homes, neural implants. Not just upgrades, but sacrifice enhancers, increasing the volume and precision of our data offering. This machine-guided logic, trained on spiritually inverted data, shapes our legal identity, redefining sin as trauma, salvation as self-actualization, subtly shifting our breath identity under machine logic. It functions as a perpetual consent engine, generating endless microfilings benefiting the adversary's claims.
Okay, all these convergences seem to lead to one ultimate goal, the mark of the beast. The sources depict it not mainly as financial, but as the final legal breath's signature seal. How does Ritual Machine explain the profound implications of this mark in terms of registry and consent?
The mark of the beast, as described in the Codex Umbra, is really the culmination of this breath war, where consent gets systematized into legal documentation for the adversary. It operates as a binding signature because it combines all in one act: spiritual allegiance, legal consent, biometric registry assignment, financial compliance, and embodiment jurisdiction.
All in
one singular act. By taking the mark, individuals reportedly authorize the adversary's priesthood to govern their breath identity across every conceivable layer: spiritual, commercial, medical, digital, even their technological embodiment. Digital contracts, terms of service, biometric ID enrollment are presented as already systematizing permanent breath forfeiture, often unknowingly, through hidden breath jurisdiction clauses. These multi-jurisdictional breath filings, surrendering biometric, neural, financial, health, virtual identity data, are claimed to prepare for the beast throne itself. This throne, envisioned by the sources, will function as the centralized courtroom interface, where the adversary argues for total breath governance authority over the earth, based on our voluntary consent to the system. And fundamentally, the sources state, without this mark, no one will be able to legally trade or operate financially within this global breath economy.
Wow. Okay, despite the sheer scale, the ancient roots, the technological sophistication of this system, the sources do maintain there's a resistance, the remnant, or trade not as soldiers with swords, but as legal witnesses in heaven's court. How do these sources explain their way of operating, using petitions, declarations, testimony as executable code to counter the adversary.
The Codex Umbra really emphasizes that the adversary system thrives on silence, ignorance, passive consent. So the remnant's active voice, their specific legal actions, are portrayed as absolutely crucial. Their role as legal witnesses means they understand the spiritual legal framework the adversary uses. They use petitions, declarations, testimony, not just as prayers, but as actual executable code to directly challenge the adversary's fraudulent claims in heaven's courtroom. The sources detail how the remnant can expose these illegitimate legal filings, effectively nullify dark contracts, restore divine jurisdiction over souls, even recall scattered breath fragments. It's presented as direct spiritual litigation, the remnant acting as authorized legal officers in a cosmic court.
So renunciation in this context becomes a really powerful tool. Can you elaborate on how Breath War and Ritual Machine describe this as a legal annulment? What resources are available to the remnant, according to the texts?
Renunciation, as defined here, is a profound act of legal annulment. It's not just changing your mind. It's a formal spiritual process to break what the sources call the adversary silent consent structures. The Prayer of Petition manual, explicitly referenced from Breath War, details specific methods. This manual instructs them on how to name fraud, clearly identify and reject counterfeit contracts, how to invoke the blood of the Lamb as the ultimate legal counterclaim, how to file petitions in heaven's court, and crucially, how to renounce counterfeit contracts we might have unknowingly entered into. This process, they claim, is a spiritual execution of authority, nullifying dark contracts, restoring divine jurisdiction over the soul, recalling those harvested breath fragments. It's presented as an active legal process of reclaiming stolen ground.
And crucially, the sources assert the adversary can never truly own breath. He can only fragment it, traffic it, manage stolen pieces. God alone remains the sovereign source, the legal owner. The registry of heaven, sealed by the Lamb's blood, stays unbroken, visible only to the Father. So the adversary's whole system operates like a shadow bank.
Yeah.
It can move breath currency, but can't mint its own. This leads us to the concept of the unwritten name. How is that described as the ultimate immunity from the machine?
This concept, laid out in both Breath War and Ritual Machine, is paramount. The unwritten name is described as the ultimate immunity because it represents an identity encrypted in spirit. Sealed eternally by the Lamb's blood, this identity is invisible to Babylon's AI, utterly indecipherable to the adversary. It can't be digitized, can't be marketed, can't be simulated or replicated within the counterfeit registry. It is essentially the spiritual fingerprint no registry can clone.
Indecipherable.
The sources claim that those who bear his name and his father's name written on their foreheads, a spiritual mark, definitely not physical, possess this unwritten name. It's spirit, not ink. Therefore, it can't be hacked because it was never authored by the Codex of Cain. It represents the ultimate, unassailable freedom from these counterfeit systems described.
So we've taken a truly extraordinary deep dive today, exploring a narrative that, well, it really reframes history, power, identity itself. The Breath War, the intricate ritual machine. The sources we've looked at paint this picture of an ancient legal battle unfolding through very modern systems. From the origins of human division right up to global finance and tech, all through this lens of breath as legal essence and consent as a binding contract.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And this intricate narrative raises a profound question for you, our listener. Given these claims about breath as legal essence and consent as this binding contract shaping jurisdiction, how might your own daily interactions, from the digital agreements you click yes to, maybe even your emotional responses, your internal declarations, how might they be interpreted within such a framework? What does it truly mean to reclaim the name, to breathe in resurrection, as these sources suggest? Beyond just a spiritual idea, when you're confronted with this concept of ubiquitous registry systems and an AI-managed breath economy trying to define and categorize every bit of your existence.
Consider how deeply the concepts from this deep dive, the struggle for authorship over your own breath, the pervasive influence of a counterfeit registry, might already be woven into our world, according to these sources, shaping everything from tech to governance. What does personal authorship over your own breath really entail in an increasingly digitized, interconnected existence? And how might you choose to re-engage with it, thinking about all this?